Right now, the world is on the brink. Trump's impeachment is just around the corner. The US may completely turn its back on Ukraine, while Trump and Musk are having a loud showdown. While the White House is shaken by scandals, the Kremlin is hatching a devious plan of strike in 2026 that could redraw the world map. The Ukrainian Armed Forces are not giving up. Superdrones are entering the battle, capable of changing the course of history. Meanwhile, behind enemy lines, airfields are burning and helicopters are exploding. These scenes are blowing up the internet. All this and more in our upcoming report. Hotspot. Shock! Trump will be carried out of the White House. Bloodbath in the USA. Trump and Musk have started a public brawl on social media, and things are really heating up. Meanwhile, the US might withdraw its support for Ukraine. Scandalous statements, intrigue, and unexpected twists. US Special Envoy Keith Kellogg hints this operation could lead to peace, but at what cost? The details will surprise you. The details of this political bombshell. Watch now.
US President Trump stated he tried to persuade Putin during a phone call not to retaliate against Ukraine's attack on Russian military airfields.
He was attacked and attacked quite harshly. They went deep into Russia. And he told me, we have no choice but to strike back, given the circumstances. And this probably won't be very pretty. I don't like it. I said, don't do it. You shouldn't do it. You need to stop. But again, there's a lot of hatred.
At the same time, Trump is reportedly outraged by Operation Pautina, and because of this, a wave of discussion has arisen in the White House about the advisability of further supporting Kyiv. Trump compared Zelensky and Putin to fighting children.
We see two little kids who are both really fighting like crazy with each other. It's obvious that they completely and utterly hate each other, and they're still fighting there in the middle of the park, right in front of everyone. And you're trying to separate them. But they don't want to be separated. And sometimes it's better to let them fight for a while and then break them up.
It's obvious that Trump's enthusiasm and that of his inner circle about being able to quickly reach an agreement with Russia and achieve some tangible progress on the peace track has significantly diminished. And as the Western press is reporting today, the White House is indeed discussing a scenario of a soft, gradual, and smooth shift away from rhetoric that presents Trump as the main peacemaker in the Russia-Ukraine war.
When asked about introducing new sanctions against Russia, Trump publicly avoids answering and states that he supports Ukraine and that Putin is not his friend.
They say I'm a friend of Russia, but I'm not anyone's friend. They say I'm friends with Putin. I got along with him, I respected him, and he respected me. I'm with Ukraine. We signed a major deal on rare earth metals, and you know what I want? An end to the killings.
In fact, Trump's connection with Putin, his strategic plans to divide the world and to revise global geopolitics, all of this now comes up against Putin's unwillingness to engage in constructive dialogue on some rather important issues of world order.
The Russian side stated that during the phone conversation between Trump and Putin, the texts of memorandums on ending the war were not discussed. This may indicate that Washington is gradually withdrawing from the peace negotiations.
In principle, Russia does not set itself the goal of reaching any kind of compromise. Russia's objective is to prolong the war. Russia's goal is to keep throwing up a smokescreen for Trump himself in order to stay in the discourse, while at the same time, with the other hand, carrying out terrorist acts and trying to seize Ukrainian territory.
The Russian ambassador in London even went so far as to declare that the latest Ukrainian attacks pose a threat of World War III.
Such actions take the conflict to a new level of escalation, which means it's better not to do this, and instead to recognize that this is a limited conflict and it should remain that way. There is no need to try to drag the world into a third world war. That is the worst case scenario we can imagine.
Apparently, Trump now has more important things to deal with. For example, a spat on social media with his former best friend Elon Musk over the law extending tax breaks, which Musk criticized. Trump said that Musk was just offended and out of his mind and threatened to cancel all contracts and subsidies for his companies.
Elon was on the edge. I asked him to leave. I canceled his electric vehicle mandate, which forced everyone to buy electric cars that nobody wants anymore. And he had known for several months that I was going to do this. And he just lost it.
In response, Musk stated that without him, Trump would have lost the election and that he would decommission the Dragon spacecraft, the only vehicle besides the Russian Soyuz capable of transporting astronauts to the ISS. He also accused Trump of attending financier Epstein's parties, where the sexual exploitation of minors took place.
It's time to drop a real bombshell. Trump was mentioned in the so-called Epstein files. This is the real reason why those files have never been released. Have a nice day, Donald Trump.
Lately, the American president has been less and less focused on the issues he promised to address during his election campaign. At the same time, however, he is increasingly the subject of sensational headlines. But this doesn't bring any real benefit.
Moscow is preparing a decisive strike. The plan is to seize two regions and completely cut Ukraine off from the Black Sea. But Ukraine is not sitting idly by. A next-generation strike drone has entered service. And this could be a turning point. Why could the year 26 be the end of the war? Everything points to an impending collapse within Russia itself. We will show the truth about what is happening at the front. Details, figures, and footage right now.
No pause and no de-escalation. In 2026, Russia plans to seize two regions and cut Ukraine off from the Black Sea. Moscow is preparing a large-scale occupation of eastern Ukraine and the buffer zone at the borders, despite signals of negotiations. Also, despite diplomatic efforts, including Donald Trump's attempts to persuade the Kremlin to come to the negotiating table, Russia continues to pursue aggressive plans to expand the occupied territories of Ukraine. This was reported by a politician citing Ukrainian officials in Washington. According to the statement by the deputy head of the Office of the President of Ukraine, Pavlo Paliza, the Kremlin expects to establish full control over the Donetsk and Luhansk regions as early as this fall. The next stage is the creation of a buffer zone along Ukraine's northern border by the end of 2025. Russia's plans do not end there. In 2026, Moscow may attempt to seize territory east of the Dnipro, including the Odessa and Mykolaiv regions, which would deprive Ukraine of access to the sea. This would deal a blow to Ukrainian grain exports and logistics as a whole. Such ambitions are also confirmed by Western analysts. In their view, Russia will accelerate its offensive in the summer to increase pressure on the armed forces of Ukraine and their allies. However, maintaining such a pace until 2026 will be extremely difficult due to losses and overstretched resources. Meanwhile, NATO countries' intelligence services do not observe any signs that the Kremlin is abandoning its two key war objectives, subjugating Ukraine and revising the European security system established after the Cold War. Thus, instead of de-escalation, the Kremlin is planning a new phase of the war. At the same time, the Ministry of Defense of Ukraine has adopted the strike drone General Chereshnya AER into service. This is a new generation multi-purpose system. The Ministry of Defense has officially codified and authorized for use in the defense forces a new domestically produced unmanned aerial system called General Chereshnya AER. This was reported by the main directorate for the support of the life cycle of armaments and military equipment. So what can this drone do? It is a multi-purpose strike UAV capable of engaging a wide range of targets both on the ground and in the air. It is distinguished by its high flight speed and the ability to operate at altitudes inaccessible to most enemy drones. The drone can also boast high strike accuracy. Overall, the system is equipped with both daytime and thermal imaging cameras, featuring an automatic target detection and recognition system, which allows it to carry out strikes manually, semi-automatically, or autonomously. As for mobility and deployment, the system can be set up in a matter of minutes, which is especially important for mobile operations on the front line. This makes it an effective tool for rapid counterattacks and precision strikes on targets. The introduction of such UAVs expands the drone capabilities of the armed forces of Ukraine and strengthens their ability to engage highly maneuverable and well-protected enemy targets. And many experts believe that the year 2026 could mark the end of the war. Experts have commented on the role of internal collapse within the Russian Federation. The end of the war may come as early as 2026, not because of agreements or a turning point at the front, but as a result of internal collapse within Russia itself. The conflict has entered a war of attrition phase, where victory will go not to the one who advances, but to the one who can endure the longest. The economic situation in Russia continues to deteriorate. The central bank acknowledges a recession, inflation is rising and the prices of essential goods are hitting record highs. Amid shortages of even basic products like potatoes, Moscow is already being forced to seek emergency supplies from neighboring countries. Sanctions pressure, mobilization and the depletion of military infrastructure are leading to a growing systemic crisis. At a certain point, continuing the war may become impossible, and then the conflict will end not through negotiation but through an internal admission of defeat by the Kremlin. The year 2026 is seen as a potential turning point when internal crises may force Russia to halt its aggression, even if fighting on the front lines continues. That's all for today. Tune in tomorrow for more news.
Russian occupiers are trying at any cost to get closer to the positions of the defense forces in the Pokrovsk direction. Previously, the Russians used motorcycles, but now they have launched assaults on electric scooters. Ukrainian soldiers note that drone operators still turned out to be faster. As a result, the enemy personnel were eliminated and their vehicles were turned into scrap metal.
The movement of the occupiers had already begun, but it didn't last long. Somewhere after lunch, we had already finished everything, but usually they don't stand a chance. To be continued.
The Pokrovsk direction remains the hottest spot. Since the beginning of the day, Ukrainian soldiers have repelled 42 unsuccessful attempts by Russian occupiers to break through the defense forces' positions on this section of the front. It is precisely on this part of the front that the Russians are suffering colossal losses.
Regarding losses, it is worth noting, for example, the losses of the so-called 15th Peacekeeping Brigade of the Armed Forces of the Russian Federation. This is military unit 9600 with its permanent base in the village of Roshinsky, Samara region. It should be noted that during the fighting, specifically in the Pokrovsk direction, this brigade has already replaced its personnel for the third time, meaning the losses are enormous.
The enemy continues to suffer losses in the Kharkiv region as well. Ukrainian soldiers have destroyed heavy and automotive equipment of the Russian occupiers in this section of the front, as well as their personnel. The fighters note that both FPV drone operators and machine gunners are demonstrating precision work.
Here's the howitzer itself, here's the ammunition, and here is where the crew lives. First we hit the howitzer. While I'm hitting the howitzer, Lima is working on the house. First destroy the howitzer, then the crew that ran into the house, and if necessary will finish off the ammunition as well. This machine gun is used to engage
enemy personnel and lightly armored vehicles. It operates at ranges of 1, 400, 1, 600 and 1, 800 meters. By using a certain type of ammunition, it can engage light armored vehicles, so one could say it can destroy almost any of them. The UAV operators demonstrated an aerial drone duel. The soldiers note that the pilot demonstrated his skill by manually taking down yet another enemy Mavic.
This is not just a small drone at the occupiers' eyes. It adjusts artillery fire, and it's a potential threat to Ukrainian defenders. Every Russian drone shot down means one less set of enemy eyes and one more life saved for our guys. From a statement by the 1st Presidential Brigade of the National Guard of Ukraine on Facebook,
UAV operator units continue to operate along the entire front line, destroying enemy personnel and equipment that the enemy throws into so-called meat assaults, particularly in the Toretsk and Novopavlivka directions, where Ukrainian soldiers repelled 13 Russian attacks each.
This is our landing.
In the Kursk region, Ukrainian soldiers are not only managing to repel the enemy, but are also carrying out assault operations. As a result, dugouts, communication trenches, and Russian army firing points were destroyed. The fighters note that the Russians continue their assaults in this direction. Since the beginning of the day, the Ukrainian Armed Forces have repelled 7 Russian attacks in the Kursk region.
Their plans are clear to create a buffer zone in the Kursk region. We can see that they are making advances there. And they would also like to capture the entire Donetsk region. So these are the kinds of plans being set. First, you said that there is a huge gap between plans and reality.
Ukrainian drone operators destroyed a Russian drone warehouse, 2 artillery positions, bunkers, and a telecommunications tower in the Kursk region, as well as eliminated enemy personnel and blew up a shelter with troops inside. The border guard soldiers reported on their brilliant work.
Sensational news. Ukraine will receive maritime armor worth 400 million. The Netherlands is providing extremely powerful weaponry. This is a serious blow to the Kremlin's maritime ambitions. Ships, boats, drones, and more. This is no longer just assistance, this is preparation for total control over the sea. What else will Kyiv receive? Details coming up right now.
The Netherlands is strengthening the Ukrainian fleet with ships and drones. This was announced by the country's defense minister Ruben Brekelmans at a meeting of the Ukraine Defense Contact Group in the Ramstein format. The military package is valued at 400 million euros. It includes 100 vessels, 50 maritime drones, weapon systems, sensors, and spare parts. Brekelmans is quoted by the Dutch Ministry of Defense portal. This is an important package of measures to strengthen Ukraine's maritime security. We see that the Russian threat in the Black Sea and the Dnipro, among other places, is only increasing. The port of Odessa and the trade routes passing through the Black Sea are considered a lifeline for the Ukrainian economy. Without proper protection, it could collapse. We simply cannot allow that to happen. After the full-scale invasion, partners such as Finland, Estonia, Britain and Norway have been providing significant assistance to the Ukrainian Navy. In March of the previous year, the Dutch Ministry of Defense also supported this branch of the Ukrainian Armed Forces. The vessels mentioned in the new package are small boats that can be quickly delivered to the country by land. Ukraine has an enormous coastline, 85% of which is controlled by the occupier. From the Danube Delta to the Dnipro, there are a huge number of important maritime and river infrastructure facilities. In addition, the country must ensure the security of the trade route in the Black Sea.
As a rule, these are boats ranging from 10 to 25 meters in length. They can have such a superstructure, autonomy of up to 3 days, and small crews. These boats can be equipped with small arms such as machine guns, grenade launchers, and possibly manpads, mine detectors and neutralizers, and anti-sabotage stations. They are small, but we need them very much. This includes patrol, transport, interception, and special operations forces boats. They can be used during operations in the Kherson region on rivers. There are no restrictions here. They conduct reconnaissance and surveillance. Secondly, they can respond directly to sabotage threats and mine threats.
50 maritime drones are also part of the military aid from the Netherlands. The partners are not disclosing exactly what this entails.
The Netherlands is actively developing drones that deal with hydrology, meaning they can see underwater. This is very useful both for hydrographic surveys of the seabed and the sea itself. And this is very important for mine countermeasures and the creation of anti-ship drones. At the very least, I think that these 50 drones in question will be used to survey the maritime area and address the mine threat that may be present there.
In addition, the Dutch Ministry of Defense reports that 20 million euros will be invested in the regional maritime training center where Marines are trained. This package includes weapons, ammunition, as well as uniforms. Analysts believe that this assistance from partners is one of the practical steps in implementing the recently adopted new Black Sea strategy. The EU plans to strengthen its geopolitical role in the Black Sea region.
Every voice matters. Join our community, support independent journalism, and help us bring you the truth from Ukraine. Become a member of Ukraine today. Join us now. A full-scale military storm. Putin has declared war. Ukraine faces missile hell. Hundreds of Shahed drones and missiles launched. Is this revenge or just the beginning of a catastrophe? The Ukrainian Armed Forces strike back at the very heart of the enemy. Airfields are burning. A fiery show in Bryansk. Russian helicopters were destroyed one after another. What else exploded behind the front lines? And it has become known. Moscow is planning to cut off Ukraine's access to the Black Sea. How exactly? Look!
Russia has once again carried out one of the largest attacks on Ukraine. On the night of June 6, Russia launched 407 drones and 44 missiles at Ukraine. Kyiv, Chernihiv, Lutsk, Ternopil, Khmelnytsky region and other areas came under massive attack. There are wounded and dead. But at the same time, Russia was getting what it deserved in return. Many regions were unsettled by raids from Ukrainian drones. Some of them caused quite a stir in Engels, Saratov region as well. A fire broke out at an oil depot that supplies fuel to the Engels 2 military airfield, where bombers are stationed. Explosion, fire, smoke. All of this was spectacular, without a doubt. I know, this fuel is very specific for aircraft. You can't just go buy it at a gas station, bring it in a fuel truck and refuel a plane. It's quite unusual. It has some additives, mixtures, and again, it's simply not sold at regular gas stations. So, for a certain period of time, we deprived the Russian Federation of some of its fuel reserves. But don't forget, there are strategic reserves in other places. But that's not all. Drones also reached the Tambov region. The strike hit the Progress plant, which produces high-tech equipment for aviation and missile control systems.
They could hit an administrative building or they could strike a finished goods warehouse. The fact that it didn't detonate doesn't mean anything. For example, some computer, there's no need for it to explode. It burned up, and with it, all the files, all the slides, all the presentations, all the technical documentation. The whole plant could be paralyzed, but again, we need to wait for some kind of verified confirmation, and it's quite possible that it won't come right away, maybe in a week, a month, maybe two, maybe even more than a month will pass.
And finally, Ryazan. There, a fire broke out at the airfield, where Russian strategic aviation was almost certainly stationed. And by the way, speaking of Russian planes, after the successful web operation, the Russian authorities probably couldn't think of anything better than to hide. The Tu-160 at an airfield in Chukotka itself? Well, that's quite a predicament. For Ukrainian drones, the issue isn't even the distance, but simply that a truck with drones, there's no way it'll fit there. Because, unfortunately, there is no road to the airfield.
They were frantically in emergency mode, searching for some remote airports to relocate to, abandoned airfields, anywhere to land. But before they could land there, the local counterintelligence and police combed through the nearby forests, the closest gas stations, and clearings, looking for any outsiders, for any suspicious cargo or containers.
Although perhaps the Russian authorities were also frightened by the effective work of Ukrainian drones in the Bryansk region. After all, according to Russian media reports, the Bryansk airport was attacked and Mi-8 and Mi-35 helicopters were destroyed. Yes, 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 excellent. Nevertheless, despite Trump's hopes that Putin would come to his senses, Deputy Head of the Presidential Administration Pavel Paliso stated that Russia is planning to occupy the Donetsk and Luhansk regions in the fall and then to create a buffer zone along the northern border by 2026.
We don't know under what circumstances he was asked, what exactly he was asked, or why that particular rhetoric was used. Perhaps the question was about what the Russian Federation sees for the future, what their plans are. And maybe he voiced his own vision. But as for me, I don't think the Russian Federation currently has the capacity to do everything he mentioned by the end of 2025 or I don't know, by the end of 2026. I think they simply don't have those kinds of resources.
Kellogg's daughter also responded to the overnight attack on Ukraine, writing on social media that it was a loud night in Kyiv and that in her view, Russia does not want peace.
Shoigu is begging him for help. Putin's army is now looking for a new meat draft in North Korea. The Secretary of Russia's Security Council personally flew to Pyongyang. A meeting with Kim Jong-un could determine the fate of the front. The Kremlin is desperate. All hope rests on the North Korean dictator. Details of this alarming visit are coming up next. Putin's puppet Sergei Shoigu has arrived in Pyongyang. The former Russian defense minister flew to North Korea on the orders of the Russian dictator to meet with North Korean leader Kim Jong-un.
We just need to see this through to the end so that I'm sure the deputies will respond positively. We just need to see it through to the end so that it doesn't get lost anywhere.
The very close ties that have strengthened between Moscow and Pyongyang during Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine have not been lost anywhere. Since then, official visits by representatives of both countries have become very frequent. Shoigu's previous trip to North Korea took place literally 2 months ago on March 21. 21.11/2011, you actively participated in the military operation in Syria, Mr. Shoigu, sir, as part of your official duties.
I am convinced that this meeting in Pyongyang with Shoigu's participation, of course, indeed deserves special attention that is quite significant because, as I mentioned earlier, this is primarily about some political component that needs to be discussed in person, something they don't want to address or deal with, let's say, at the level of a phone call. In other words, these are such delicate, sensitive agreements that Shoigu himself had to come in person as he conveys Putin's position.
According to Russian media reports, during the so-called negotiations, Shoigu and Kim Jong-un are expected to discuss the implementation of certain points of the Comprehensive Strategic Partnership Agreement between Russia and the DPRK.
Two completely totalitarian regimes have made an agreement between themselves. But this isn't really a treaty about comprehensive strategic partnership, is it? This is purely a concept, right? Just like gangsters used to do. Because we all know perfectly well that the Russian Federation never fulfills the international agreements and obligations it takes on. In this particular case, North Korea and the Russian Federation are connected by a whole range of mutual interests.
North Korea needs foreign currency and advanced technologies.
North Korea needs food. North Korea needs money, of course. North Korea needs smuggling routes, which the Russian Federation has already established due to the sanctions imposed on it. And again, North Korea needs military technologies specifically of a nuclear nature.
Russia in turn will likely ask North Korea once again to replenish its army ranks with soldiers from North Korea.
Russia needs a lot, just as much as North Korea needs from Russia. Above all, Russia needs cannon fodder. Russia needs people. North Korea, I'll emphasize again, is a totalitarian state where the concept of human rights does not exist. And if at the highest level, a decision was made to transfer manpower, in essence, North Koreans into the hands of the Russian Federation's army, then North Korea is seeking out this human resource and handing it over to Russia.
It should be noted that a few days ago, an international meeting of security service heads from CIS countries and others took place in Moscow. The Minister of State Security of the DPRK also participated in this meeting.
The second objective, which let's say is critically important for the Russian Federation to obtain from Korea, is production capacity for scaling up its military-industrial complex. We can even see that there have been several visits by the new Minister of Defense of the Russian Federation, again to Pyongyang, where from insiders we have learned once more that discussions are precisely about establishing cooperative ties between Russian military enterprises and similar enterprises in North Korea.
Let us recall that in November of last year, North Korea and Russia ratified a treaty on comprehensive strategic partnership between the two countries. The document provides for military and other assistance if one of the parties is subjected to armed attack by another state and finds itself in a state of war.
There was also a non-public part of this agreement, as they say, an understanding within an understanding, right? That is most likely, with a high degree of probability, there could have been provisions in there specifically concerning the transfer by the Russian Federation to North Korea of nuclear technologies, including, let's say, technologies for completing the nuclear triad cycle.
Earlier, Shoigu also reported that in 2025, a visit to North Korea by Russia's top officials is planned. The Doomsday Radio is back on the air. A mysterious Soviet-era signal suddenly came to life after the talks in Istanbul. The airwaves were filled with strange, alarming sounds. This is not the first time the voice of the apocalypse has awakened amid an escalation. What is the Kremlin preparing? Is Moscow hinting at a new phase of the war? All the frightening details right now.
Mikhail, Dmitry, Zhenya.
The Doomsday Radio has started broadcasting again. The radio station went on air immediately after the talks in Istanbul. All of this was done to transmit a new encoded message. 2 messages and 2 words, Ayba Baza and Ayza Baza. Later, at around 5:30, the radio station came alive again and broadcast the word Arapa Blitz. All of this is also accompanied by numbers. So far, no one has been able to decipher this code, but interestingly, the radio often starts broadcasting before or after important events.
The activity of this radio station transmitting coded words was noted before the start of the large-scale invasion. In connection with the conversation between the president of the Russian Federation and Trump, this station has now gone on air after the talks in Istanbul ended.
The official name of the Doomsday Radio is the Russian radio station UVB-76. It is also called the buzzer. That's because most of the time the station only transmits a buzzing sound. It is broadcast about 25 times per minute. But sometimes the buzzing noise is interrupted, and that's when coded voice messages are transmitted. This radio station is shrouded in mystery. No one really even knows exactly when it began broadcasting. It is only assumed that it started in 1975, and since then its operation has never stopped. The broadcast runs around the clock.
What exactly it is remains unknown to the general public, and I suspect that very few people actually know what it is at all. There are different theories. Some believe it's military communications, others think it's for intelligence services.
The function of this radio station is also unknown. A former Minister of Information Technology of Lithuania claimed that the purpose of the voice messages is to confirm that operators at the receiving stations are on standby.
You could say that this is one of the indirect signs by which one can track Russian military activities, such as bringing nuclear forces to combat readiness, declaring a general alert, or as they say, a full state of readiness. But there is probably no reliable information at present about what exactly the signals from this station mean.
But why is UVB-76 called a doomsday radio? It's all because possibly this very station will be the one to announce the end of the world, or more precisely, to start it. It is believed that the radio station is connected to the Russian missile system perimeter, and in the event of losing contact with the top leadership, it will automatically trigger a nuclear counterstrike.
In other words, when everything is shut down, the command centers are destroyed, the missiles will launch on their own according to pre-programmed instructions, and the signal to launch, according to some reports or assumptions, will be precisely the cessation of this radio station's broadcast.
So if the transmission stops, that will be the signal to launch the nuclear warheads. That's exactly why messages from the Russian radio station are being monitored so closely. But it's entirely possible that this is simply a Russian information psychological operation. All of it is meant to intimidate Ukrainians, to create fear, panic, and chaos. As if to say, if the doomsday radio is active, then a nuclear strike might be in preparation. But such assumptions are most likely just made up. No one knows if there will be a nuclear strike except for the Russian sociopath dictator. If something like that happens, thinking about the radio will clearly be the last thing on anyone's mind. Although, indeed, it's not impossible that this is a secret code used by the Russian military.
That's all for now. For more hot news from the front, tune in to the next episode.